John F. Kennedy would have turned 100 this year. He was the first Catholic to be elected president, a presidency that marked a turning point in this country. In the new book, The Road to Camelot, former Boston Globe reporters Thomas Oliphant and Curtis Wilkie take an in-depth look at how Kennedy changed modern political campaigning forever. They're here along with their friend and our friend Tom Brokaw. Guys, good to see you. What an honor to have you all here. I started reading about this when the book showed up on my desk about a week and a half ago. And my first reaction, I hope you'll understand this, was, what are they going to tell me I didn't know before when it came to John F. Kennedy? What were you looking to do?
Well, explode a few myths. There's a mountain of evidence over the last 60 years that has been hiding in plain sight, Matt. And we took a deep dive into this gargantuan supply.
You know, it occurs to me that when I said in the introduction there, you know, the first Catholic president, I let it just roll off my tongue. And yet if you go back to that time, there were a lot of people in this country who didn't think that would ever happen. It was monumental.
I was 20 years old. I was in college, and I'd forgotten what an incredible issue it was to Catholicism. Today, we don't think about it, but back then it was an enormous issue.
Is it fair or unfair to draw a comparison or create a comparison between John F. Kennedy as a Catholic being elected president and fast forward to Barack Obama, an African-American, being elected president?
No, I think that Barack Obama got to be president in part because of the breakthrough that John F. Kennedy made in terms of things. The other thing about that time was my parents were dirt road Democrats. They were very suspicious of John F. Kennedy, Catholic and from this very wealthy family in Massachusetts. They didn't feel connected to him. And what is striking now when you look at it, and they bring it out so clearly, he was the end of the crowd. We had Stu Symington, a Missouri senator who was very highly regarded, Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey. They all wanted to be the Democratic candidate. He was a guy who was thought of as a playboy in the Senate. And as you said at the beginning, I didn't think there was anything more I could learn from all of this, but these two guys, my old buddies, have turned up a mountain of stuff.
One of the things he did that no one had done before was he hired a pollster, a young guy named Lou Harris. And Harris taught him that, for example, religion was actually a two-edged sword. There were all kinds of independent-oriented Catholics who came out to vote for him because he was Catholic. And seeing that balance, and much more importantly, getting Kennedy to talk about it. Unlike, say, Al Smith in 1928, Kennedy would bring it up.
We've talked a lot. Tom and I have talked about this, and we talk about it on the show a lot, that campaigns these days go on for, it seems like, an eternity, and yet there is a very important vetting process that is a part of the length of that campaign. But in the book, you guys go back and you look at, really wasn't a one-year campaign, it was a 5-year process undertaken by John F. Kennedy to prepare himself and put himself in the right position to be elected president.
Right. He really got started at 56 at the Democratic Convention, where Adlai Stevenson threw it to the convention to choose his running mate. And suddenly this young, inexperienced senator nearly captured it at the convention, and he burst onto the scene and took advantage of it.
People talk about Joe Kennedy, Tom, and I guess depending on what your experience was with him at the time, you would have one opinion or another. String puller, backroom, deal maker was a couple of the things you've heard. But something interesting in the book, though, is that within the campaign, his reputation was different.
Very different. The money, yes, that's a given. But we found in our deep dive into all this stuff that his advice, his orders, his browbeating of his sons was almost never paid attention to. He had a concept of this game the old way, back rooms, big deals with bosses and whatever. Kennedy was the first guy to run for president in a way that let the voters in. And that put him at, his father yielded the turf. But to say that he was a significant influence on that campaign would be a grotesque
That's a major
overstatement.
myth broken, because you know, my feeling about him was always he said jump and the son said how high.
Remember how after one of those things, Curtis, John Kennedy, I think, got up and said, well, thank you very much, Dad, for your advice and everything, but here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, it was about going to West Virginia.
Yeah.
He opposed going to West Virginia. It turned out to be a very pivotal primary. and they had a powwow, and the old man says, "You don't dare go there. There are no Catholics in West Virginia." And John Kennedy said, "Well, we've heard from the ambassador, and this is what we're going to do," which was the opposite.
Well, it's always been so striking to me about the relationship between John Kennedy and the father is that the Kennedy guys, you know, including Bobby, also learned, however, from the father about how to do a deal. I mean, you know, they took it to the next generation. This was a corporate kind of campaign in terms of how they organized it. And the old man had a hard time dealing with that.
Let me say this. If you're like me and you thought there's nothing new to learn about John F. Kennedy, Curtis, and Thomas, change your mind on that in this book. Congratulations, guys.
Thanks.
You're hanging out with a nice guy as well.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.